If you are going to spend a significant amount of time in Spain every year, you may be wondering if it's better to own a car or to rent a car in Spain, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money Spain, where we explore all that Spain has to offer. So, the experience that I bring to this topic is that I have rented cars probably over 20 times in Spain, and I've also owned a car in Spain for several years. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both owning and renting a car in Spain. I'll go over everything from price differences to conveniences to taxes and more. I'll also share my opinion based on different scenarios that you may find yourself in. For example, if you live in Spain or if you only visit in the summer, and try to help you identify what is best for you. This is something I regularly debate for myself, and as we get into this a bit more, I'll explain why this topic keeps coming up for me and what recent decision I made that best fits my situation going forward. So let's start by going over the advantages of owning a car in Spain. First, owning a car in Spain can offer long-term cost effectiveness, especially if you live in Spain full-time or if you spend large amounts of time in Spain each year. Second, it's going to give you freedom and flexibility. You have complete control over your vehicle, which will allow you to do things like making spontaneous trips or even driving to another country or lending your car to a friend or family member. This is probably the most important to me and the thing I valued most about having my own car in Spain. Third is that you can customize a car to your liking. If you want to add a roof rack or a specific sound system or any other number of customization options. And fourth, your car is an asset, so at some point it can be sold. Even though the value may decrease, it will generally still offer some sort of future value as a sale. Okay, now let's go over some of the disadvantages of owning a car in Spain. First, we have the upfront cost. Of course, this will vary greatly depending on what kind of car you're looking for, but there is some level of upfront investment. The second disadvantage is the cost of ongoing maintenance, and this is probably the most significant hurdle for me. There are often unexpected costs for repair, and this can really add up. The third disadvantage is maintaining the inspection on the vehicle, not only because you have to make sure your vehicle can pass inspection, but also because this is required annually, and the appointments, especially in tourist and expat heavy areas, can be really hard to come by. If you're like me and you're only in Spain for 4 or 5 months every year, then you're only driving your car for a handful of months and then having to get it inspected again. I'll get to this more a bit later, but it's just one of those things that should be simple, but can actually be a big pain. The fourth disadvantage is parking and storage. Of course, this depends on your situation, but if you don't own a home that provides parking and you're not living in Spain full time, then this is something you'll have to arrange. I'll go over more details and options for this later in the video. Lastly, I should also mention that if you are going to buy a car in Spain, if you are not a resident, you need to either own a home in Spain or have a 1-year contract on a home rental. Okay, now let's touch on the advantages and disadvantages of renting a car in Spain. First, renting a car does offer a different kind of flexibility, allowing you to rent when you need it based on specific dates. The second advantage is that there is no long-term commitment, and with that comes less responsibility, at least in some ways. The third advantage is that it allows you to rent a vehicle that meets your needs at that time. Do you need an SUV to move a lot of things? Great, rent one. Do you need a larger car when friends and family come to visit? Great, rent that when you need it. One of the best advantages for me with renting a car in Spain has been the price. Now, this won't be for everyone in every situation, but because I am usually in Spain during the shoulder seasons of the spring and fall, I get incredible rates for car rentals, often paying for an entire month what it might cost me to rent a car for just 1 day in the US. But this isn't guaranteed, so whether or not this is an advantage is largely dependent on the specific circumstances. This could also be impacted by location. Most of my rentals have been either from Valencia or Alicante, which have been super cheap, but in a more tourist area like Barcelona, I would bet that it would be more expensive. Okay, so now let's talk about the cons of renting a car in Spain. I think this probably goes for renting a car from anywhere in the world, but there are definitely some car rental companies out there that will try to upsell you when not necessary. And I'm sure that just like me, you've heard or experienced some horror stories. In all of my travel experiences, the craziest, most absurd things that have happened to me have involved car rental companies. In Spain, there was a company I used over and over again called Firefly. I never had any issues. Then one time, I signed all the paperwork without looking carefully, not realizing that the woman had added over $400 worth of additional charges without asking me or even trying to sell me anything. I'm sure she was doing it to pad her pockets with commission, but in my mind, she's a thief, and the car rental company wouldn't do anything about it. I wasted days of my time and ended up just returning the car early. And while I fully take responsibility for the fact that I should have more closely read the contract, because of that, I will never, ever rent from them again. It was truly an awful experience. Other than that, I've rented from a lot of companies in Spain and never had any issues. And truth be told, Firefly might generally be okay and have just one bad employee, but if they aren't willing to handle it, that's their fault. The next con could be insurance or the price of insurance. Let me explain. First of all, the reason that so many of my car rentals are super cheap is that I never take out the additional insurance through the car rental company. And here's why. First of all, I've put myself in a financial situation where I have an emergency fund, so if something happens and I need to pay for it, I can afford it. For example, when I rented a car in Valencia, someone broke the back passenger window and stole a bag of mine from the trunk. The cost of the window that I had to pay the rental car company was about €300. But just the insurance alone to cover the car during that time would have been more than €300. I'd rather put that money in a bank account every time and pull it out if I need to pay for a repair. I've also once had to pay for a scratch on a car. That also cost me a couple €100. So in total, after years and years of renting cars, I've spent €500 in damages. But if I had purchased the insurance every time, I would have spent thousands and thousands of euro. Often I find that the car insurance is 2 to 5 times more expensive than the car rental itself. In a little bit, I'll briefly explain some other insurance options that are far less expensive. Which leads me to my next con, and for me, that has been just the worry that something will happen to the car. I don't worry about that as much when I've had my own car in Spain because it's my car, so if something happens, I have more control over the impact. But with a rental car, I feel a bit uneasy about what I could be charged if something is spilled or if someone bumps my fender. Of course, we're still going to go over coverage options. Another con is that the best deals in car rentals that I have found in Spain truly are seasonal. Now, almost every rental I've ever had in Spain falls into the category of the cheapest I've rented anywhere in the world. However, one time I was in Spain over Christmas, and for just 1 week, it was going to be $600. That would usually pay for over 3 months of rentals in Spain. And that $600 price tag is actually what led me to buy my car in Spain in the first place. Another example of seasonality is the summer season. I've never rented a car there in the summer, but I would assume that the prices go up just like they do for everything else because that is when Spain, especially in the coastal areas, is flooded with tourists. Okay, so now that we've gone over some of the pros and cons, let me tell you a brief overview of what my story has been. I bought my first home in Spain in 2018, and it wasn't until the end of 2019 that I decided to buy a car in Spain after that high priced holiday car rental price tag that I mentioned. I bought a 20-year-old Honda CRV that was in great condition. I knew that a Honda, even an older one, would run really well for a long time. Well, we all know what happened just a few months later, the pandemic. So then the car ended up just sitting for a couple of years. Of course, no one could have seen that coming. But then I'm stuck paying car insurance and road tax for those 2 years on a car that I can't drive because I can't even get into the country of Spain. The whole pandemic really changed my life in a lot of ways, including how much time I spend in Spain and how often I visit. Even though I still go twice a year, it isn't always as long. Now, I have been super fortunate with friends who have helped me with my car. Not long after the pandemic, I ended up meeting a new friend in Spain who allowed me to park my car on her property under her carport whenever I was out of town. My other good friend would check on it for me and make sure the battery was disconnected so that it wouldn't drain while I was away. But here has been the more recent rub for me. There are several times it's needed to be in the shop here and there, and since I'm only there for a month or two at a time, if it has to go into the shop while I'm there, then I have to end up renting a car anyway, and it really defeats the purpose. And I'm sure you've heard of the manana culture in Spain. Well, it's real, and it's no different with mechanics. One time a mechanic wouldn't receive my car because it was Friday, and they just didn't want to hassle with it. Another time, a mechanic was supposed to have my car ready in about 3 days. After already being 2 days late, I received a text from them saying the whole shop would be on a 2 week vacation starting that day. I kid you not. They messaged me about 30 minutes before they closed for 2 weeks. More recently, my car didn't pass the ITV, and I had to get a lot of work done. I tried a new shop with great reviews, and they couldn't even look at the car for almost 2 weeks. Then another 2 weeks for the repair. All of that aside, I really do like the mechanics I've used, and they do a good job. It's just the culture. You better be ready to wait. And if I'm only in town for 6 weeks, that's just not worth it to me. The other thing is that you have to get an inspection every year, and I wish I could tell you that this is easy. In some areas, it probably is, but from what I understand, the government recently took over the inspection process, and it can really be a headache. You have to book an appointment online on a site that regularly has issues, especially if you are using a mobile device, and often in the heavy expat areas, you may have to book an appointment months in advance. I'm not saying all of that to discourage anyone from owning a car. If I lived in Spain full time, I would highly recommend it. But over the last couple of years, I have found it harder and harder to find the value in owning a car for my specific situation. I'm just not there enough, and half the time I end up in a rental anyway. All of this led me to sell my car on my most recent trip to Spain. I'm fortunate that it went to a good friend. I really loved that old Honda, and I'm glad I'll still see it around. But for me, a car rental just makes more sense going forward. Another benefit for me using a car rental is that I never have to figure out a ride to and from the airport. I live an hour away from either one. If I'm renting, I just grab a car when I arrive and return it when I leave. So, my advice would be to consider owning a car if you are living in Spain maybe 7 months a year or more, or if you are visiting regularly for long periods of time during high tourist seasons when the rentals are more expensive. Let me break down real quickly what your financial obligations will be if you own a car in Spain, just so you have an idea. First, there is the cost of the car itself. Second, you have the cost of insurance. For my 20-year-old vehicle, I paid around €300 per year. Then you're going to have the cost of the ITV inspection each year, which will generally run you between 30 and €50 per year, depending on region and vehicle type. And lastly, you'll have road tax, which is based on several factors like region and car type, but mine was €122 per year. Of course, there are variable items like when you pay for ongoing maintenance or parking while you're away, but those items are more specific to your situation. Now that we've talked about the cost to own a car, I want to briefly mention some examples of the deals I've found for car rentals in Spain and some of the common themes I've seen. During the shoulder months when I travel, my costs to rent a car have sometimes been as low as $1 per day, and on the high end, maybe around $10 to $15 per day, both of which I find to be very reasonable. I personally have found that the best deals are for rentals that last between 2 and 3 weeks long. For some reason, when I put in a whole month or more, the price per day tends to go up at least a bit. So I have often rented a car for around 3 weeks, then returned it and picked up a new rental. Now, I'm a super budget-minded person. I'm always trying to save a buck if I can. I've also learned that sometimes it's worth paying a little extra if it means not having the hassle. So if it only saves you a little bit, it's probably not worth spending the time to exchange a car. Another thing I've noticed is that starting at one airport and returning to a different airport is almost always more expensive, so I try to fly in and out of the same airports. For me, this is usually at Valencia or Alicante airports, which I find to be cheaper than renting from one of the locations within the cities. There are a couple of search engines that I exclusively use to find the best deals, and I will list those affiliate links in the description. I get a very small commission if you use one of those sites to book, but they are truly the sites that I use myself, and it doesn't cost you anything extra to use my links, so I always appreciate the support. Okay, in addition to the deals on the rental itself, I promised I'd come back to car insurance and parking. So even though I usually turn down any additional insurance from the car rental company itself, there are a few other options you should know about. First of all, third party liability is included automatically, so at least you will have that for free. Another option I use are the coverages offered by different credit cards that I have. If you are using a credit card to rent a car in Spain, it would be really important to first make sure it is a credit card that doesn't incur international fees. And second, if they offer various types of rental car coverage, make sure that it includes international car rentals. And you may also want to check into the maximum length of the coverage. One other option that one of my British friends uses quite frequently is buying insurance for the car via another company, and he saves a lot of money versus adding it at the car rental counter. Okay, now let's briefly talk about parking if you own a car. If you don't have a garage and are maybe wanting to leave the car near the airport for a long time, there are parking options in my area of Spain for around €1 per day, which isn't too bad. One other quick note. Whether you rent a car in Spain or buy one, you will need your international driver's permit, which is really easy to get. In the US, you just need to grab one from a AAA location. Okay, I think I've talked about everything I intended to cover, but if you have questions about anything, be sure to let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to help answer them. Do me a huge favor, like this video and subscribe to join me every day for Adventure in Spain.